Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hello, friends, and thanks for joining us on another episode of The BAM. Today, we're going to introduce you to the badass Corinne. Corinne is a runner, and she's not just an average runner. She is an ultra-marathon runner. So she takes us on her journey of when she got started, running in high school, through college, tackling some marathons, and then ultimately finding her true love of ultramarathons. In addition, she's a mom, she's an entrepreneur, and she's pretty much just a badass. And we're super stoked to introduce you to her today. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be on with two other badass moms here. This is great. Love it.
Super happy to have you. And I think that, so Corinne and I worked together years ago and have just kind of kept in touch over the years. And I think it was a post you put on LinkedIn. Well, we connected about a year ago because you were looking at maybe going out on your own. So we talked about that. Yeah. And then you put a post not too long ago on LinkedIn. I think it was about the ultra marathon stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we need to hear more about this. So anyway, we're thrilled to have you and can't wait to dig in.
This is great. Love it.
So running, let's talk about running. I feel like people are either runners or they're not runners, which I don't know if that's true, you being a runner. I like to say at one time I enjoyed running, and now I feel like because of like knee issues, this, that, and the other, I like to consider myself more of a cyclist. But let's talk about your running.
You're an athlete. And anybody who's active, whether they walk or hike or, run a mile or run 100 miles, you're an athlete and you're a runner. And I think that that's important to just make sure that, people don't underestimate and undercut themselves, especially women. If you're out there being active, you're doing good things for your mind, for your spirit. You're probably making yourself a better person. So all of it should be celebrated.
It's funny too, because we all happen to live in Colorado. And one of the things that you see when you're here, we're such a fit state that you very easily feel like very lazy if you're not doing all the things. Right. And what's the stat? Like the stat is like only 1% does a full marathon. I don't know. You probably know better than I do. And I can't even imagine what the stat is on ultra running.
Yeah, it's growing, but it's definitely still a very niche sport. So, and I wasn't an ultra runner, so to speak, until just a few years ago. Ran track and cross country, and in high school I ran cross country. In college, but to me back then it was like, half marathon. That's a really long way. And right out of college, I actually decided to train for a marathon with my husband, and it was like this huge thing. Like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do long runs every weekend. We're going to do nothing but, run long and then eat and then sleep. And then, and it was a massive endeavor to just prepare for one road marathon, which was the London Marathon. And so, that I guess was just the beginning. I also did a 6-day stint on the Camino de Santiago trail in Spain in college. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was probably like my first ultra. I didn't run it. I hiked it. I walked it with a backpack, but I was by myself, and I did like 12 to 15 miles a day. And it was an amazing experience of like just self-discovery and independence and all of that. But looking back on it now, it was probably like my first so-called ultra. So then, after I trained for that marathon, and Graham and I ran it together, and our goal was 10-minute pace. Mm-hmm. I think we ran a 4-hour, 40-minute marathon, which I was very happy with at the time. Yeah. I was like, dude, that's great.
That's solid.
It sounds good. I mean, that's a good time.
Yeah. But then fast forward and, we kind of started running a little more and getting a little bit more, it became more of the lifestyle. I didn't run very much, and we can talk about this if you want, but when I was pregnant or when my kids were real little, but kind of long story short, about 5 or 6 years ago, my kids, my two boys are now 9 and 12. And I decided to start competing again. And so, at the age of 34, 35, I kind of jumped back into this whole scene. And couple years into that, I decided to run my first ultra, which is anything longer than a marathon distance. And so it's only been like 3 or 4 years that I've been doing, ultra distance stuff, but I absolutely love it. And it's such a cool sport that you can get into at honestly any age.
What's the terrain? So, you said you did a road marathon. So, and I've done a couple. We'll see if I do any more, but it's on the road, right? Like it's paved. Yeah. So are most ultras on a trail? Are they on dirt road? Like how does that differ?
It runs the gamut. So you can find road ultras if you're really into roads and you love being on the pavement and just kind of that whole not having to worry about, your foot placement and just going fast or just trying to hit certain splits. You can find ultras 50K, 50 mile, 100 mile that are on roads or that are on a track or that are on like a 1 mile loop. But majority of
terrible.
I know it does, but it's also amazing that people do this.
Yes.
It's incredible. But the most of the trail runs that I do and the races that I do are on trail, either single track or, dirt. And they do have a lot of elevation gain in them. So like the CCC, which is part of a big race called the UTMB, it's in the Alps in France. And that was kind of like my big event 2 years ago in the fall. And you cover about 60 miles and you cover 20,000 feet of elevation gain in that race.
You're literally running up a mountain is what you're doing.
Yeah. There's also hiking, at those grades, like you are hiking. This is not like some people at the very, very top end of the sport can run all of these things, but vast majority of people, there is definitely like a good amount of power hiking involved.
Yeah, we did. And it's not anywhere close to this, but the Wild West Relay, which is the Fort Collins to Steamboat.
Yeah.
I did it several years in a row and absolutely loved it. But I remember when we were training for it, because I was like, I will not walk. Like I had in my head, like I will run the whole thing. Otherwise I didn't really run the race. Right. Yeah. And our coach was like, you'll go faster actually if you like hike or walk it in certain points. And she was right. So it totally changed my perspective. And so to that point, it's like, I thought ultra running was all, or trail running was all running. And so it's good to hear that there's like some hiking in there as well.
Totally. Absolutely. And a lot of these races have enough of a time cutoff that, if you can just keep moving forward and you can optimize some sections where you can jog or shuffle, like they're a lot more approachable than I think people realize.
Yeah.
So I have a question back to what was the switch that, I feel like, being called an athlete or just being, always into fitness my life, like I kind of have my answer to it, but I'm curious of yours. Like you did your marathon and then instead of saying, I'm sure you did at that point, like, I want to do it better. I want to do it faster. What was that tipping point to be like, I want to do it longer. I want to see how much harder I can push myself. Like what was it that was kind of motivating you to move into that direction?
Sure. Yeah. Well, at that time, I think, running kind of became something that my husband and I shared. It was something that we were doing together. And he has always been an avid, like when he found out that I was from Ouray, Colorado in the San Juan Mountains, he was like, oh my God, because he's always been a kind of like a mountaineer. He skis a ton. He loves like just being up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And so honestly, it was that like, he started saying, I think I want to try this running thing more, but I think I want to do it on trails. And I want to get into actually like starting to work with a coach and going out and exploring like areas that I want to see in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And me growing up in the mountains, I kind of took it a little bit for granted, but I also had a little bit of a, there was kind of like this unseen pressure around it because I have an uncle who was a world-class runner. He won the Hard Rock 100 in 1999 at age 50. And so he started the Imogene Pass run. And so I also kind of had a little bit of this, like, well, if I do it, like I'm going to be being compared to my uncle.
Sure.
And I was also like, I don't really like running up hills. Like, I didn't like it, honestly. I'm like, hills are hard. They're hard. And so I kind of just started to venture into it a little bit with my husband. We'd go run together on these trails. And I think I started to realize, like, I like this. I love running downhill, so you got to run uphill to get to the downhill. But it also kind of brought back some of my childhood of hiking with my mom and dad and my family and going on camping trips and being like, hey, when I was like 8 years old, like I was chasing my dad down some of these trails, and that feels fun and natural. And, I'm really enjoying it. So kind of just this whole new world opened up.
One of the things, so I love that you said that your uncle won at 50, because that's awesome. And you said Leadville. Was it Leadville that he won at 50?
Hard Rock.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and one of the things I was going to ask you about is just aging as a runner, right? Like, what have you noticed? And one of the things that, and I think I've shared it already, but I was diagnosed with osteoporosis this year, and I was freaking out. And I'm like, I love running. I want to continue running. Can I still do that? And my doctor said, yes, absolutely. Like, you actually want to feel that pressure on your bones. But she said, I would love it even more if you did hills, like if you ran hills. And so, I mean, that has been something that I've been like, I need to incorporate, because I've run on a flat trail, right? Yeah. So how have you felt your body change in the sport?
For sure. I mean, I always used to be just a wafy, no muscular kind of, individual. And, as I started to do trail running, like I kind of like had a butt all of a sudden. I was like, this is awesome. Like, and like my quads and kind of like just muscularly, like you have to build that strength in order to do it. And I think it's really good for you. And as you age, like I'm really trying to incorporate more strength training in as well. But I think it's just really interesting to dive into overall female health, and especially that of, endurance athletes and athletes in general, women that are active as they age. Because I think we know a lot more now than we used to about what we can do to mitigate some of that wear and tear, be it protein, be it the strength training piece, be it, I take creatine now, like, things like that I think they can help us have more longevity than maybe in the past, if we want to remain active.
Yeah. And it's funny. So Corinne, you met Sarah, my business partner. And she and I had this discussion the other day, because I listened to a podcast, and it was a man saying, this is what you need to do for longevity. This is what you need to do to build your muscles and all that stuff. And I found myself getting angrier and angrier, because I'm like, yes, he's speaking to the masses, right? But I'm like, there needs to be, women are 51% of the population. Yeah. And we have so little research. And you're right, it's getting better with women like Stacey Sims, and you've met some amazing women that have done research on this. But I just feel like, why are we not studying this more? And there's some game-changing things we can do that will help us be active well into our, old age.
Totally. I mean, we live longer than men, I think, on average, right? And interestingly, within the sport of trail and ultra running, like as the distances get longer, the gap between men and women at the top level gets smaller. Really? From an endurance standpoint, there are a lot of women that are winning outright races, beating all the men, and like at the 100-mile and even now 200-mile distance. But even some of the shorter ones, it's just amazing what we're seeing women do. I mean, Courtney Dauwalter has been someone who has shown that time and time again. She placed in the top 10 in Western States 100 last year, which is one of the most competitive, probably the most competitive 100-mile trail races in the US. And her time was faster. She did break the course record, but her time was faster than this laundry list of professional men internationally that have won or run this race. So it is, I think, yes. And I think that the science is coming along. I work with my coach is Megan Roach, and she's an MD who was at Stanford. She's doing some incredible things with research around, female endurance athletes. And I think that it'll take time, but we're starting to see a lot of these studies, also having cohorts of women in them.
That makes me so happy. And then of course you layer in menopause.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we've talked about that on the show before, but it's complicated. We're way more complicated. So we're not just like mini men, right?
Right. Exactly.
So Corinne, let's talk about with the running and the training, obviously, because it sounds like you don't just run for the fun. You sound like you're pretty competitive too. Am I right? Like you're out there to beat a time and to really compete. How has that affected, shifting and being able to raise your boys and be able to fit it in, and your husband being a runner? Like, how do you juggle that all? And has it gotten easier or harder as they've gotten older?
Well, honestly, with kids, I do think that it gets a little bit easier as they get older. I mean, there's a reason that I didn't run as much when they were really tiny. That's the most demanding stage. I feel like it's the time when your body's probably the most out of whack. And, there are some people that come right back after having kids and compete at a high level. That just kind of wasn't, I don't think the best thing for me. So as they've gotten older, I think that it has become a bit easier to train. They've also just grown up knowing like, this is something that mom and dad do. And like, this is the way it is. And so I think I'm very lucky to have a super supportive husband who also understands. And even if your partner doesn't run themselves, if they understand kind of your goals with it and they're supportive of that, like that's just huge, because then you just take turns on the weekends doing long runs. And now that they're older, we've been able to go out and do some ourselves, and they can stay home by themselves. So that's a game changer. But it is, I think, before we had kids, we said like, we're not going to stop doing the things that we want to do. It might be harder. It might take longer to get out of the house. We might have to bring them with us sometimes. But we're going to continue doing the things that are important to us, because it's also a good example of kind of showing them, what's possible and exposing them to some really cool environments and stuff like that. So
you can see what you're capable of and what they're capable of. And I think you and I talked about this at another time, but I didn't start running until after I had kids. And that's when I was active on and off, as a teenager and that kind of thing. But it wasn't until I had kids that I was like, these kids are watching me. Like they are watching me, and I want them to know what they are capable of, and that it's important to take care of yourself and to take time for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So I have a question. Do your boys run?
My oldest, who's 12, does run a bit. He does like a casual track and cross country program. And then he ran a 4.5 mile trail race that my husband was running the longer distance at. And he did it and he did great. He's done a couple of Spartan races. Oh, cool. So he enjoys it, but we're also very, adamant. I think conscious of, not pushing it on them. To us, this is a lifelong thing. This is something we want to do forever. And, I got pretty overwhelmed in high school in particular. And in my junior year, kind of having the pressure around performing at the state level and things like that, I really got burnt out on it, and almost said, I'm done running. Yeah. So, I think we want them to try a ton of different things and just become an overall athlete. And if they want to run, they can do that. But honestly, I'd rather they never participate in a race and enjoy the outdoors and want to, hike and go camping for the rest of their life than be, a top level athlete. If they want to do that, we'll support it. But I think it's just, it's more important to us that they're happy with what they're doing.
The love for whatever they do, right?
Exactly.
I'd love to hear, you said you didn't run while you were pregnant. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I probably about 20 weeks into my first pregnancy, started to just, my body felt different. When I was running, I felt like my gait was different. I felt like I was just moving differently. It was kind of uncomfortable. And, I just decided like, I don't need to. Of course, I was not like competing at that time, so there was not that pressure, but I also was just kind of like trying to listen to, this doesn't quite feel like I'm not enjoying it. I don't know. So I just backed off. I didn't run. I actually ran around Sloan's Lake because we lived in the central Denver area the day before Stowe was born. I ran 3 miles because I was frustrated that he had not come yet. And I was like, that's it. I'm going out.
Yeah.
And Graham's like, I'm going with you. I'm going with you. Like,
that would have been a great video to have on YouTube.
It would have. Yeah. But yeah, so there was that. But yeah, no, I just didn't feel like it was, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was the right thing for me to do. And there's nothing against women that run straight all the way through their pregnancies. If they feel good, if it's helping them, mentally, like, go for it. I think you just need to listen to yourself.
I think that's exactly the point. Like, you listen to your body, and it's not, the science is all there that exercising while you're pregnant is fine. It's good for you, all the things. And I took a similar tactic. I wasn't running at the time, but I did scale down my exercise and did a lot more walking and stuff that just felt better for my body at that time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If you kind of felt, how did you, being an athletic person, how did you feel that void, I suppose?
Yeah.
You said you weren't running, but I'm sure you needed another form of an outlet. Was it walking? Was it, what worked for you?
I think I walked quite a bit. I think we did, I did some yoga, some prenatal yoga classes, that kind of thing. Like, I think that's probably about it. It was so long ago. I'm trying to remember. But no, I think walking, mostly walking and maybe some yoga, maybe some, classes or that kind of thing.
I remember, I'd given birth 3 weeks prior. So I had it was my oldest daughter, and she was in the baby Bjorn, and I went for a hike with my husband and my dad, and she was in the Bjorn, and my dad was cranking up Sanitas in Boulder. Mm-hmm. And he's like, pick up the pace. And I was like, I just gave birth.
And I'm carrying this child still.
I still vividly remember.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I went skiing a couple times, and I remember bawling my eyes out because my brother was like going to take me down this double black, and I was pregnant, and I was like, I was like, first of all, this is too steep for me, and I hate moguls, and there's bumps all over this thing. Yeah. And second of all, I'm hormonal, and like, I don't want to fall and hurt my baby. Like, I think there was some skiing in there, but maybe like against my will.
Yeah.
So Corinne, I have a question. Let's switch gears for a minute. So we've talked a lot about your running. I want to talk about your business. You own your own business, and the transition from working in corporate to doing what you now do, and how that kind of coincided, with your running.
Yeah. So I spent about 18 years in corporate roles, in the talent acquisition space, in various kind of capacities, both doing direct recruiting, and then standing up, leading a recruiting function for a smaller startup for the last 6 years before I decided to kind of go out on my own. And amazing experience. I do, there's a lot of things about the corporate world that I appreciate. I love the structure, the fact that you kind of have this steady income, and you're, you've got healthcare, and all of these things are great. And I think you can learn, a lot from that environment. So I ran throughout that, and fortunately I had jobs and companies that, were conducive to that. I was able to get my running in, or do it, before work, or it wasn't, I worked for some really great companies. I think I decided, and maybe this was kind of a turning 40 thing, that all of a sudden, call it a midlife crisis, or just midlife revolution or something, revelation, that where I was spending my time was really important, and I needed to make sure that was intentional toward things that I was passionate about. And for a bit, I thought maybe I'm not passionate about recruiting anymore. And I think I realized I am passionate about the core of it, which is helping people find the right jobs for them, helping companies find great employees. And that all of a sudden, like, my involvement in the running world and some of the things I was doing there kind of lent themselves to realizing like I can kind of do both of these things, and I can kind of meld these worlds together. You know, for a long time when I was recruiting, whether it was entry level sales programs or, you know, senior level, executive level roles, the people that ended up being the best employees and honestly doing the best work oftentimes were athletes. I mean, there's so much that you learn being an athlete that translates to the professional world that, you know, I think that sometimes that was like, man, okay, here's the right candidate and they're an athlete. Like, we just know that this person is going to do well. And so I started to kind of have this like, oh, I know all of these people who are really good endurance athletes. A lot of them are looking for jobs. I know a lot of companies. This is like, let's try to figure out how to bring all of this together. And so, you know, so I started my staffing company, which is called Strides Staffing. And, you know, while it's just getting started, I hope to be able to also really service not only outdoor and maybe running brands, but also, you know, the candidate population of individuals that have great skill sets, you know, that I know are also awesome athletes, and kind of bring those two together.
I love it. I love how everything's just come together to support you in both endeavors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely love how you have been able to take, you know, your experience from, you know, being a recruiter and pair it with your true passion. I think that is like the ideal position, honestly. Like when I think of like, what is a good balance, because you're, you know, spending your day dealing with a lot of the people that do the same things that you love to do. And then you're helping them, you know, get into the right positions that is a great fit for them. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And most of the people that participate in this sport, you know, even many of them at the highest level, if they're professionals, they're not full-time runners. They're not doing it without also working another job. And interestingly, there's, you know, a ton of very, very successful, very intelligent people in this sport. And it's like, it's so cool. I mean, I was just at a race and like 4 out of the top 10 women are doctors of some sort. And it's how do you do both of these things? But they're high achievers. They're, you know, they have big goals. It's just like, so it's really cool to also just be able to kind of, you know, share that like-mindedness with this group.
And you have to love it. If you're putting in that kind of time and you're working and you have kids, like you have to love it, because, you know, you have to prioritize your time and you don't want to spend time on things that you don't love.
Totally.
So
what's been your biggest race that you've done, and what's been your favorite? Because the biggest isn't always your favorite, right? Or maybe it is.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of races that I'll mention. So one is, I did my first international race at the end of 2022. And that is part of the UTMB, or Ultra Trail Mont Blanc series, which is one of the biggest ultra, kind of the Super Bowl of ultra running in terms of the size. It's a week-long festival where they have like 6 different race distances across the whole week. And I ran the race called CCC, which stands for the 3 different countries that you or regions that you're in on the race. So you start in it's in the Alps in Europe, and you start in Courmayeur, Italy. You then run to Champex-Lac, Switzerland, and you finish in Chamonix, France.
That's amazing.
That sounds amazing.
Do you have to qualify?
What's that?
You have to qualify?
You do have to qualify. Yep. They have a lot of races that you can run to get what they call stones. And so that's an evolving system that's pretty complex, but like happy to help anybody if they're interested, understand how to do that.
There you go, Jenny. There's your next.
I'm like, I want to go to the Alps.
Oh, man. One thing, you can actually run on the Mont Blanc Trail anytime. It's a very established trail. Even if you don't run the race, you could go tour it. And there's other races on it as well. But that race was like just an amazing experience. I got to bring my family, my husband's family. My husband crewed me. So it's 61 miles with 20,000 feet of elevation gain. And I was super proud of myself because I ended up, I was the 25th female, and I was the 8th American woman. and ran it in about 14 and a half hours. So I was really happy with the performance there, and just being out on that course and going through that terrain was like just an unforgettable experience. So loved that race. I also run for the Aravaipa racing team, and they're a race directing company based out of Arizona, but they have a bunch of races here in Colorado, now Utah, New Mexico, also out in the East. They're growing a lot, but their races are just fantastic. Really cool experiences. So there's a race called Javelina 100 that's on Halloween weekend every year. And it's in Arizona, and it's a 20-mile loop, and they have 100K and actually they have a 30K, which is just one loop. They have 100K, which is 3 loops, and then 100-mile, which is 5 loops. But the amazing thing is that headquarters with a J, so everything Javelina, 100 spelled with a J, everything's with a J. The headquarters area where you come through every time is just this big party, and everyone is dressed up, and it's like this huge Halloween party meets ultra running, and it's a really, really cool experience. So that's one that like people should just, even if they want to go spectate, go out there for a couple hours and check it out, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is wild.
I love it. That's my anniversary weekend, and actually Lori's birthday.
Can I ride my bike?
You can crew someone.
You can crew someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you train? How do you train for that many miles on your feet? Like, how long does it take you to train? Because I know just even marathon training, I was like, oh my God, this is such a slog. So how do you? Do you walk a ton or?
There's a lot of ways to do it. Honestly, during the week, I don't run more than between like an hour to 2 hours during the week. I would say on average, maybe an hour and 15, hour and 30-minute run during the week. Every now and then, if I'm doing a big build, I'll try to do a couple of doubles where in the evening I do 30 minutes on like the treadmill uphill or something like that. And then a lot of it's just, on the weekends, kind of, the weekend warrior thing. So overall, like I would say when I first started running, I was running 20 to 30 miles a week. I slowly built that up over the course of a few years to where now I average probably between 50 and 60 miles a week. Mm-hmm. And that equates to maybe around 10 to, or maybe like 9 to 11 hours of training.
Okay.
And what's your ideal time to train for you personally? Is it in the morning? Is it in the evenings?
During the winter when it's cold and dark, I'm really lucky that I can usually go out in the middle of the day. Yeah. So the kids are at school, kind of a lunch break type deal. In the summer when it's really hot, I like going in the morning.
Yeah.
And then, on the weekends, we usually try to do, we have to balance it with kid activities and all of that. But we usually, one person does an early run and the next person does like the 9 or 10 a.m. start. And we switch that like, I want to sleep in, so I'll do the 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Because I feel that way too, because my husband rides and, it's a switch off of like, okay, you go now. And then when you get back, I'll go. But remember the time when you did it together? Do you kind of miss that? Or do you still try to fit that in where, before kids, it's so easy to go enjoy those activities together, but then it becomes this like
an important time to also find a community. We started the Castle Rock Run Club. We've been in Castle Rock, Colorado now for about 10 years. And when we got here, we were looking for a run club and we didn't find one. So we started one and we were like, this has become a family of, people that all have, awesome goals. And like, we're all growing in the sport together and we all love running. And so like, we really lean on that support system to have, friends to run with. And then now as the kids have gotten older, being able to go out together is a possibility. And we're really enjoying that. So I think you just have to realize there might be a period of time when you can't do a lot of it together, but also like my in-laws just moved here last year and they're really close now. And that's a huge perk and a huge benefit to be able to, have them hang with the grandparents while we go do some adventures.
My brain kind of goes to recruiting and like looking at the skill sets that you have when you're an athlete like you and your husband, right? And thinking about your communication skills have to be on point because you have to constantly be like, I'm on this, you're on this, that kind of thing. Your time management has to be impeccable to fit it all in. Your prioritization. Yeah. So, I mean, like all of those things, back to your point about athletes being amazing employees. When I was at a former company, they really sought that out. And it was because of the discipline and the ability to coach and all of those types of things that made these people, and the perseverance, the not afraid to be told no, right? And they were high achievers. So all of those things made these amazing employees, particularly in sales.
Also goal setting and kind of that, working towards something a little bit at a time, breaking it down into small pieces, but having that end goal and really like figuring out what you need to do to get there. It's totally it totally crosses over, whether it's a project or a deal that you're trying to get done or anything else. Like the way you think about it, especially if you're in an ultra, you cannot think about running, 50 miles or you'll get it's overwhelming. Yeah. You got to think about 1 mile at a time, the next aid station. What am I doing right now to take care of myself for 6 hours beyond now? And so it really I think that that crosses over for sure.
Oh, and what do you listen to when you run, or do you?
That's a good question.
For that amount of time.
So most of the time in those long races, I do listen to music. And I have just various playlists. I can't listen in training. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, and catch up on kind of the news or try to do some learning. But in a race, usually it's a really long playlist of a lot of various eclectic music. And sometimes I'll take it in and out depending on what's going on. But it is, I think, helpful, especially for me, to sometimes kind of stop thinking and just run. And therefore the music kind of helps with that.
Yeah.
I've found that balance too with riding. There's times where you want to listen to music and then there's times where you just, you don't want it. You just want to be there, but fascinating. So what are you most excited for coming up? It could be, business wise, running wise, family wise. Do you have anything on tap that you're really looking forward to in the near future?
Oh man. I mean, I think, definitely excited about kind of, what I'll be able to do with, with the staffing firm, and just hoping to kind of start establishing a base of great clients and candidates in that, hopefully, getting my women-owned and minority-owned certifications to be able to kind of help with that piece as well. And just starting to really establish and build the foundation there. It's not, it's not easy, and it's not easy when you're balancing a lot of other things too. So, looking forward to kind of building those roots with the firm. And then on the running side of things, I'm helping build out a high performance team for a nutrition brand right now. That's really exciting because I just get to talk to people about running all the time and be like, do you want some great sports nutrition? Let's have a conversation. And I think I'm going to be super excited to just be at a number of the events that are just amazing in our sport this year. Western States 100. I'll be at the Hard Rock 100. I'm going to be racing myself at a few places, but also crewing and pacing friends and supporting them. So just being out in the community, in the running community, is going to be really exciting this year.
And you're also a coach, right? You coach people too.
I do. I coach a handful of athletes, a pretty small roster, but I have some great athletes that have done awesome things. I have an athlete who finally broke 3 hours in the marathon. He's been trying for 3 years, got his Boston qualifier. I have an athlete who just knocked her 50 miler out of the park and beat her time by about 90 minutes beyond what she was planning to do. And an athlete who has finished the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. He completed it in the golden hour, which is the cutoff time. So he was out there for a good 47 hours.
Oh my God.
Doing the entire Mont Blanc massive loop, which is 100 plus miles. And just, talk about being inspired by the people you're around about the grit and resilience. So, the people I coach are amazing, and they really just help keep me inspired.
And you have a podcast. I want to bring that up too. You just started a podcast.
So we just started a podcast, my friend Russell and I. It's called Ultra Uncovered. And We are really talking in depth about some of the most iconic races in the US and beyond. Just started it, just have one episode out, but we'll have a second one coming in the next few weeks. And so, if you're interested in just hearing about these races, if you're curious about like maybe jumping into them yourselves, our goal is for them to be kind of evergreen episodes about like, this is what it would be like to run this. So the first part, we talk about the terrain and the elevation profile and the weather and the environment. And then the second half of it, we interview somebody, could be a pro, could be a back of the pack runner. And we talk about their experience truly like being out there and being on the course.
Oh, that's awesome.
Awesome. I can't wait to listen.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure learning more about running in general. For a non-runner, it was awesome. I might be inspired to, maybe do a half marathon. I don't know. My knees aren't the best. I think I might have to stick to cycling, but hopefully you've inspired so many people to try something new or continue doing what they love. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you both so much. This is a great thing you're doing. And I love that you're highlighting badass moms. There's so many of them out there. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for inspiring all of us. And I think you may have convinced me to try a trail race. So
you'll love it. You'll never go back.
I know. That's what I'm afraid of.